Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BAInsights session. I'm really pleased to have three excellent guests to talk about life as a young BA. It's a topic that's been on my radar for a while and the pipeline for a while. So I'm glad that Joe, Nicola, and Dan have joined us for this conversation. If you're a young BA or a slightly older BA and you've got any comments to share, please feel free. If you haven't subscribed, feel free to do that as well. But besides all that, before we get into the detail, let's do some introductions. And I wonder, Joe, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, I'm Joe Haslam. I'm an enterprise business architect at the University of Manchester, but I started as an apprentice business analyst about 7 years ago. I've recently transitioned into this new role. So happy to talk today about my experiences being a young business analyst and hopefully we can share some insights and things around that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joe. And I'm glad to see, apart from myself, the lack of grey will probably mean that the three of you have got something to say about young BA. And I'll try and dig into the old memory banks to remember what it was like back then as well. Thanks, Joe. And Nicola?
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a senior business analyst at Evri. Similar to Joe, I started on an apprenticeship about 6 years ago, and I've been a member of YBA for a few years now as well. So I'm really excited to sort of share my experience and what it was like coming from an apprentice to a senior. And yeah, it's me.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Dan.
Hello. Yeah, good to be back on here as well. Yeah, I'm Dan. I'm a senior consultant in business analysis working at CMC Consultancy. I kind of had a background actually in IT support and then found out about the role of business analysis quite naturally, and have spent the kind of the past few years getting a degree apprenticeship in business analysis and the CVAP from IIBA, and also becoming involved with young business analysts, which I'm sure we'll be speaking more about in a minute.
Absolutely. And feel free to share all the good work that YBA are doing, Dan, as you go through. The same goes for you, Nicola, and Joe, of course. All right, excellent. Well, you're definitely clearly qualified to talk about being a young BA. So that's the main criteria sorted. You're also a business analyst, so that's the second criteria. So away we go. So I wonder, Joe, if I can start with you in terms of you just share with me what your view is of why or what could the role of a young BA entail, and is it any different from being a junior BA?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think when I think about young business analysts, from my experience, obviously, your mind goes to being young in age. And obviously, when I started myself, I was an apprentice, and I was actually only 18 when I started the apprenticeship. But I think as progressed and worked with a variety of different business analysts, started to think of young business analysts more of someone that's potentially early on in their career as a business analyst as well. So there's potentially a differentiation there. I mean, you can be a young business analyst in age, but also new to the role. And to your point around the junior business analyst, I think from that perspective, it's maybe around the actual job title itself and the role itself. So I know there's, junior business analyst as a role is quite a common found thing. And that might be more akin to like the actual responsibilities of being a junior BA around more of a supportive role, like supporting more senior BAs. So I think really the age thing comes into play potentially, but it's more than that. It's that first step of your entry into the career of business analysis that I would say makes you a young BA.
Excellent. There we go. I have no idea of how old the viewers are, but if there's anyone who's over the age of 40, then at least you can count yourself as a young BA if you're new to it. Anyway, so glad to hear your answer, Joe. Thank you. Nick, what would be your perspective on that same question?
To be fair, there's nothing that I can add to that. I think the definition of a young business analyst in our community of YBAs is sort of at the start of your professional career as a business analyst. So yeah, absolutely, completely agree with everything that Joe said.
Okay, and as Nick and Joe have done such a great job explaining what answering that first question, Dan, anything from you to add on that one?
I think the idea of young BA and junior BA, I can kind of see, similarities between. I think, the idea of a young BA isn't just the junior, and in fact, you could be a young BA that is now a business analyst or a senior business analyst. And at least what we've seen in the community that we are kind of all involved with of young business analysts, really the people that are involved in that are all really showing a keen desire to learn, to progress, to network with one another as well, which many junior BAs might do, but it's I guess this idea of a young BA of saying, you know, I might be young in age, but actually I'm still really gripping this role and wanting to go far.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, my assumption therefore would be that a young BA is probably someone, as you said, started their career, just coming into the role, probably picking up some relatively modest responsibilities in the first instance, just getting comfortable with the role, probably getting comfortable potentially meeting new stakeholders and talking about topics and domains that perhaps they hadn't approached previously. And it sounds like being a young BA and being recognised in that way, it's just a really good platform to learn and probably not have the pressure of having a title of like senior or lead or principal BA or something along those lines. But I'm sure we'll cover some of those bits in a little bit of detail in a little while. So, Nicola, I mean, what options or avenues are there that exist for someone who is considered young but wishes to get into business analysis?
I mean, so obviously you know that Joe and I were both apprentices. So that's one avenue that you can get into it, and that's how I particularly started. But I'm going to be completely honest, I didn't know that business analysis was a thing. I originally applied for project management, and they said based on my personality, I'd be better suited to business analysis. So I kind of fell into it. And I think if you're talking to other business analysts, you'll find that they also just fell into it. So there's quite a lot of different routes into it. Even if you start as sort of a tester, you can still go into business analysis because it's not necessarily a field where you can get qualifications in it, but you don't necessarily need qualifications to get into it, if that makes sense. It's more about the kind of the person you are and your approach to things. Do you lead with curiosity and that kind of thing? So I suppose it's either potentially looking for junior positions coming up if you're not currently in the field, or if you are in the field, do you know anybody that you could potentially shadow to pick up some BA knowledge and go from there, maybe? I'm not sure if Joe and Dan have anything to build on that.
That's a great start, Nicola. So thank you. Dan, what would be your view?
I think there's something that Nicola mentioned there, which I'd kind of build upon. You know, she said, "Oh, you know, you can be a tester and then go into business analysis." And actually, for me, that was a similar-ish journey, as in I was working in IT support for a particular company. I was doing some of the stuff to do with business analysis anyway, didn't know what it was, but I eventually found out about the role of business analysis, and my boss was really supportive of that change in role, change in responsibilities, everything else. So I think, you know, if you are working in an organization, tap into the people that you've already got connections with, that you've already built respect and rapport with, because there might be opportunities for you to do a secondment, to you know, do something there. And when you're in your current role, even if you're not a BA, actually show your curiosity, show your BA mindset, let that shine through, and then you've kind of got ammo to kind of go into it. I've been working recently with the Ministry of Justice, and a number of their junior BAs come from within the business, whether that be from the call centres or other places. And so there is that opportunity to move internally by showing your curiosity, by showing that you're part of specific networks in the organization, or whatever it is that you love, change, all that kind of stuff. So that would be what works for me, and that I would kind of recommend is use your existing network.
Yeah, and that point around curiosity, Dan, I think is really, really important, because I think, you know, there's an opportunity for individuals to harness their own curiosity and go and look in their own organisation and establish, are there business analysts around already? potentially most of them might just be aware of business analysis through observing colleagues anyway. But if they haven't, if they've heard about it, look into, whether there's a business analysis team in your organisation. There probably is. As the three of you can demonstrate, we're pretty approachable people. So go and have a chat with them and understand a little bit about the role. And I think that advice probably similar to anyone in any potential profession. Just when you join and you're in a workplace, have a look around and be open to what roles people are doing, showing interest in people, and maybe some of those roles might resonate. Or perhaps going back to Nicola's intro, someone might recognise that maybe you've made it the right quality to be a business analyst. And Joe, that'll be your view on that same point, please.
Yeah, I would completely echo that. There's colleagues in my team at the University of Manchester as well that have done a similar thing where they've worked in roles out in the business and they've been doing business analysis without knowing. And it's only when interacting potentially with other BAs that have been on a project in their area and gone, oh, hang on a minute, I sort of feel like I could do that, or that sounds a little bit like what I do. And then from then stepped into it or fell into it. And I'd just add to that as well, those colleagues have been fortunate at our place to be put through the apprenticeship as well. And I'd say as an avenue for making that transition, I think the apprenticeship is such a good wraparound because it allows you to have obviously the textbook knowledge that comes from learning from that, but also like the support around applying that in a structured way, which I found really useful coming into a job, is having the exposure to different elements of the role in that more structured, formal way, which is really useful. So obviously I know some people that potentially step into business analysis might not have that opportunity straight away, but it's definitely I would recommend if that opportunity does present itself, definitely something to pursue early on.
And I guess one avenue that we haven't talked about, possibly an obvious one, is that people can reach out to the YBA or the Young Business Analysts and find out what it's all about. Speak to some other YBAs like yourself, and hopefully walk away with a positive impression and a few options as to how they can get into business analysis themselves.
Absolutely.
And Dan, in terms of can age, whether you're young or old, can that present any specific challenges for a BA? And if so, do you have any advice for how they might be able to overcome that?
I think it can do, and it will vary on the individual. I think one thing that this isn't necessarily related to age, but could be, is that I believe that a BA kind of needs to be mature. They need to be a trusted individual. Oftentimes, as a business analyst, you're meeting people that may have been at an organization for 1 year, or they may have been at an organization for 30 years. They could be the most junior member of the team or the most senior executive. And so you're kind of interacting with a whole vast array of people. You need to be trusted. And part of that is showing your maturity, showing that you present yourself well, that, those areas. And I think that's especially in consultancy, which is the area that I'm working in. You need to come across as a trusted friend. You need to be able to build those relationships with people. So I don't think that's necessarily an issue to do with age, but it could be. And so to make sure that you come across professionally, but also relationally at the same time.
Yeah, sound advice, Dan, to get us kicking off there. Joe?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think being young, for lack of a better word again, in terms of age, can definitely present itself with its own set of challenges. I think there's a lot of times where I've been the youngest in the room and still is. And I think I'm sure we'll touch on this in a little bit, that can present with itself a challenge around imposter syndrome and feeling like, you shouldn't be there or you've not got it all figured out. And I definitely think that's hard to get through at different times. But I think it's a perspective a little bit as well that can help with that, to flip it on its head and say, yes, I am young, yes, I am new, and have that willingness to accept that and show that you want to learn. So, to come into these spaces as the youngest, with a fresh outlook, and not have that overconfidence that you have got it all figured out, have the acceptance that actually, yeah, I'm here to learn and progress, and eventually, you know, get to if they're senior, get to the point that you're at. I think, yeah, that's something that I've dealt with a lot, is being the youngest, and it can be challenging to overcome at times.
That's it. Yeah, it does depend on the audience and the stakeholders you work with, and I totally agree. I think that sometimes that credibility perhaps might be a bit harder to achieve, not impossible, but it just might mean you have to work a little bit harder as a BA. But to the point you've all made, you know, when you start to build up your relationships and understand a bit more about the business and share in your own way what you've heard through your eyes, it starts to help sort of build that trust and be seen as a credible, trusted person. Going back to Dan's point, yeah, I would agree. I think the other side to that as well, and I think you started touching on that, Joe, is really that I think we should sort of harness our newness, as it were. I think you know, if we're coming with us fresh eyes, as you say, you know, don't forget that as you're a new BA, and actually, you know, that's one of your real key strengths as you come into an organisation. You can look at things without tainted eyes, or not without all the baggage of history, as it were, and you can ask the questions that maybe others feel a little bit shy to ask, because they might well have asked in the past and they might have forgotten, but you won't be expected to know answers to questions you haven't yet asked anyway. So so leveraging that opportunity feels to be the right approach. I want to again, I'll stick with you, Joe, if I can, in terms of like your expectation when, you know, before you as a BA, before starting, and how they compare to reality, if you can recall.
Yeah, I cast my mind back, I think, because as Nick has alluded to, I didn't really know much about it when I first came across the role. Like yourself, Nick, I think I got fixated on the analysis part of business analysis, and I thought that's what it was all about. I thought it was, you know, locking yourself in a dark room and looking at how things work and analysing and coming up with ways to improve, whether that's processes, etc. And I think I quickly found out more than anything, it's about people and the way you go about interacting with people and your interpersonal skills. Whilst that analysis part is still definitely there at the forefront, the people side is equally as there, if not a little bit more. When I started, I was actually really introverted, in a sense, and didn't struggle. I didn't struggle to do it, but I found it, you know, in myself difficult to do the connecting with people, the presenting, the facilitating sessions, interviewing stakeholders. But as with anything, the more you do it, the better you get, and getting decent at that is such a profound thing to do as a business analyst, because it will really just make the job so much more enjoyable, to remove like the anxiety and worry that comes from like deep interactions with people. If you can enjoy that, you will enjoy the job so much more, because it is just so fundamental to it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Nick, I'm not sure I gave you the opportunity to ask that last question, I don't think. So if I didn't, feel free to answer the last question and this one as well.
I think I'll just build on what Joe said, if that's okay. I was very much sort of a similar vein when I came into business analysis on my apprenticeship. I was told that you would be sort of a conduit between the business and stakeholders, and I thought, okay, cool, we're just speaking to people all day. I'm really good at that. Love speaking to people. And thought, cool, I speak to people, then I analyze. Good. And I think one of the massive things that I struggled with was challenging people, because I'd come from a background in service and the customer is always right. And so I was terrified to ask why, ask those questions that, you know, a business analyst needs to ask, because I was scared of upsetting people. And nine times out of 10, if you're asking why, you're not going to upset somebody. You're just doing your job and you're being curious and trying to take that approach to things. But when I first started, I was absolutely terrified of asking those questions. And I thought people are going to, I put so much pressure on trying to build that professional brand. And I thought if I asked why, people would maybe look at me differently. And I had, as Joe sort of alluded to, I had so much imposter syndrome when I first started. I think that is sort of one of the key challenges, but it's also one of the biggest differences to now, whereas I realize, that is a key part of our role, and people actually sometimes appreciate you asking why as well. They appreciate it because they get to think it through. And yeah, I think that was one of the main differences. I think I kind of answered both. I tried to.
Yeah, thank you. Dan.
I think for me, in some ways, I had a good idea of the BA role when I was transitioning into it because I've been doing some of that stuff anyway without realizing it. I think one of the things that I wasn't maybe prepared for is, and what Joe kind of talked about, of the doing things kind of solo versus collaboratively. And actually, I love it so much more, the reality, than what I thought. I thought it was go speak to someone, write it all down, that's it. And in fact, I love that it's such a more collaborative process. For me personally, if I'm running a workshop or something, I'm doing everything there visually in front of the team, and I just find it so much more fun all coming together and doing it together. So yeah, better than reality for me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what comes across from what the three of you have said as well, I mean, is that business analysis role, as you know, is a very broad role. It's quite difficult to have, without much experience, that broad perspective on all of the things that it could entail. Some of us probably go into it with a very specific idea of what it could be for exposure of one element that we might work with BA on. But as you start to get exposed to more and more analysis, different roles, different projects, you start to appreciate there's a whole bunch of different avenues to it. Some might appeal to the person individually, some may be less towards your preference, I would say. And I think, yeah, definitely what you've all said about the relationships, speaking to people, really resonated. I mean, I do recall when I was first, given the opportunity to be a BA, primarily because of the curiosity and some knowledge of the domain I was in and some of the technology I was in. I recall sort of being asked to spend a lot of time just sitting in on meetings, not really with expectation to create stuff, but just to listen and to share my opinion and to share a view of what questions I thought would be worth asking, because I didn't know the answer to. And I think as you do more of that, you appreciate that those questions are not quite as silly as they might appear, and that you do start to understand business and the stakeholders, what they're saying, some of the terminology, and perhaps from technology, what they need as well. So it's quite a good opportunity to meet all those different people and try and learn with maybe the discomfort of being a newbie and not knowing everything, really.
Yeah.
Right. I wonder then, I mean, just build on that point. Well, I mean, we sort of touched on imposter syndrome a little bit. And Nicola, I mean, how do you handle imposter syndrome or self-doubt when you're working with more experienced stakeholders or colleagues?
The phrase "fake it till you make it" pops into your head. So imposter syndrome is something that I really, really struggle with, to be honest. Because quite often as a BA, you're leading meetings, and especially because we are all quite early on in our professional careers, it can be, as Joe's alluded to, it can be so daunting. We're running into a workshop with people who've been in a business for 30 plus years and trying to capture their understanding of the business and asking them why they do things that they do on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes you get good reactions, sometimes you get bad reactions, and it's trying to deal with that while you're also dealing with the why me? Why am I in this room talking to these people? It can be terrifying, but at the end of the day, if you weren't capable, you wouldn't have been put into the role, you wouldn't be on the projects that you're on. And I think something that really, really helps me is having somebody to run things by. So 9 times out of 10, I'll reach out to, not 9 times out of 10, but quite often I'll reach out to one of my colleagues and I'll say, I have had this meeting, I approached it in this manner. Is there anything that you would have done differently, so that you're kind of building up your toolkit that way? And, next time when you go into a meeting, oh, a colleague might have done this in this situation. Maybe I'll try that and see if it helps, see if there's anything easier. But I suppose it's just building that toolkit and having trust in yourself that you're in the right place at the right time for a reason.
Absolutely. Dan?
I think for me, it's almost about pushing into it, actually. So I do keep into mind the whole Dunning-Kruger Mount Stupid, almost knowing that when I first learn something, I'm going to be a bit big-headed about it. And then I'll realize how little I know, and it can take some time. But actually, there's real value sometimes in pushing into the imposter syndrome, making sure that you know, actually, these things I do know, these things I don't know. I don't need to know everything, but I know some things. And actually, pushing into that naivety can be really powerful. So where I work in consultancy, going into, say, the Ministry of Justice, I'm not a law expert. I don't know how a certain court, process is going through. But actually, I'm here as a business analyst, and so I'll ask my business analyst questions. I know this stuff. I don't know the law side of things, but that's where collaboration comes in. And actually, the naivety of me saying, actually being upfront and saying, yeah, I don't know these things, brings people on side with you. Actually, sometimes saying, if I pretended, oh yeah, I know what, acronym you're talking about when you're talking about this.
Yeah.
I'm not being genuine, but if I'm being genuine and saying, actually, I don't understand this law thing, I'm here as a BA, that can be really powerful, actually.
I agree. Yeah, and it's a really, really, really important point, because I think we're not expected to be experts in the domain, in the organisation, in everybody's problems. We're supposed to be in developing our personal skills and some of our BA toolkit and techniques to be able to elicit some of those pieces of information and to share it in a understandable way with those that need to understand it, really. And I think if we can perhaps position ourselves mentally in that frame of mind, it sort of takes the pressure off of having to be an expert, I find.
That's it. I love not being the expert in a law thing or whatever it is, because I'm the expert in the BA thing. We've got our different things that we're bringing to the table. It's a relief to me more than anything. Yeah.
So it certainly saves on the studying for all the law books, etc. You might have to keep in touch with. You can leave that to the lawyers. Joe, what's your view on that same point of expectations?
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome problem.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that's said there, especially around knowing what you don't know, or don't worry what you don't know. Find out about it, learn about it. And I think mentally that's a hard place to get to, because it's not our job to be the experts, but we feel like we need to be, just because of the way that our brains work to fit in. And I think to flip that and potentially help overcome that is, if you look at the business analysis job description, I think it should say on there, ask stupid questions, because I know, John, you before it said around, sometimes you can figure out that those questions weren't so stupid, and that might be the case. But also, there might be times when actually they are stupid questions, but we need to be the ones to ask them. And if you do ask them and know that's your job, you're going to feel more comfortable asking them, and it'll help with that imposter syndrome, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And as you mentioned the skill sets there, Joe, it makes me think as well, maybe we can add patience to that list as well, because we probably have to be a little bit patient and realise, that it's okay to feel like an imposter for a little while. It's going to take a while to sort of understand your stakeholders or the situation or a project, whatever it might be. Just to be comfortable that you'll get there at some point is probably the mentality for people to use to feel a bit more comfortable. And what I always find interesting as well, I don't know if you're the same, but when you speak to different stakeholders who all have different perspectives, they maybe all play different parts in the process of organisation, you realise that they're all quite expert in their own area, but they don't necessarily know about what other people are doing, so they don't know how to connect the dots. So it doesn't take long for a BA to sort of understand what others are doing, and therefore having that higher level view to be able to add some value and some insight they can share with individuals who might, on the face of it, appear to be more experienced than they are. So maybe that patience, you don't have to wait too long to use it. Dan, if we talk about, we sort of start talking about skills, and are there any particular skills that you found most valuable in your early years as a BA?
Yeah, I think part of it would be pairing two skills together. Um, Curiosity, we've talked about BA mindset, you need to be asking questions. We've also spoken just a moment ago about knowing what you don't know. So I paired curiosity with tenacity. For me, when I was getting started as a BA, I just was reading books. Every evening, or oftentimes after work, because I'm preparing for a workshop, I'm doing something. I want to, there's a reason that BCS or IIBA put out the Babok, put out the BCS, BA techniques books. They are some really experienced authors putting out some amazing information. And so, for me, I'm just wanting to take as much of that in as quickly as I can, so then I can fail fast, I can try them out and see what works in this situation or not. And just almost putting in the effort to see it through, knowing that I don't know it all right now, but I need to put in the work to be able to get to the place where I do know some of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Joe?
Yeah, quite a specific one, I think that I think about a lot, and it's like presentation skills. It's presenting and getting up and doing a presentation. I think because you're gonna do it a lot, you're bound to, and public speaking is, the biggest fear amongst the human race, to get up there and get in front of a crowd and give a talk, give a presentation. But if you can, again, I mentioned when I was talking about people skills and working with people, get good at presentations, enjoy doing it, you'll start enjoying the job. It's definitely a skill that can be honed and developed and grown the more you do it, but getting up there and doing it is hard. So it's like, take as many opportunities as you can to put yourself in that position, and that's potentially outside of your day role. So the IRM conferences that get run in business analysis, can you put your hands up and say, okay, I've got an idea for a talk, I'm going to step out my comfort zone and go and do one. And it's grabbing opportunities like that to hopefully get good at something you don't like doing, and as a skill presenting, I think it's really valuable in this role.
Yeah, I agree. And it makes me think there's always a good opportunity when it comes to presenting, because I think everyone can be better. I'm not sure there's someone who couldn't be better. But equally, there's always someone available who's presenting on something, whether it's someone on the TV, someone, on the corner, perhaps, who might be calling out that they're presenting something, or elsewhere. There's always someone presenting. So there's loads of role models to look at, and perhaps like steal the bits from their approach that you might feel comfortable in adopting yourself, at least until you've maybe got approaches of your own. So yeah, what you said there, Joe, really resonates. But Nick, what would be your view as well on that, on the key skills?
So I definitely second what Dan and Joe have just said, but just to kind of build on it, it's not necessarily a skill, but it's not something that always comes naturally. I think it's sort of having the integrity, and again, we've mentioned it quite a lot, but sort of having the integrity to say, I've made a mistake, or oh, sorry, that was completely my bad. I missed that requirement. Can we do anything else? Or you've just sort of going about in your day to day, and just everybody's human, but learning how to hold your hands up and say, okay, yep, absolutely fine, my bad. This is what we could do to rectify it and move forwards is it's a massive thing, especially at the start of your career, just having the having the courage to stand up and own up to the mistakes that we make. Because we're, like I said, we're all human. It happens. But it's something important, and it goes towards building those stakeholder relationships, which again is such an important skill that we've already mentioned about it quite a lot.
And sometimes the bad news that you have to share isn't always bad news about how you perform. It might
Yeah,
just be news that the stakeholder doesn't really want to hear, or it's not aligned to their expectations.
yeah,
But
yeah, exactly.
you've got to rip the band-aid off. You've got to tell them the truth rather than massage the information too
No,
much.
exactly. And you're gonna build better stakeholder relationships that way anyway, if you rather than telling them what they want to hear all the time, you say, well, I'm sorry that we can't do it this way, but these are the reasons why, and this is what we can do to keep moving forwards.
That's right, absolutely. I think what I would add on top of what you said as well, or you said, is really, communication is always a key skill. I think listening for me is like heavily weighted. For 80% of your communication is just listening. Fortunately, most people can listen, in different ways, and so I think leverage that, and try and take it in, and that's finding different ways to actively listen and actively engage and actively care about what people are saying is probably a good start. I think beyond that as well, I think having just maybe a little bit of enthusiasm for the role, and trying to help people and actually caring about the problems that you're ultimately going to be trying to solve, will help in the end, because it's always easier, I think, to try and solve something that you're invested in rather than something that you feel a little bit detached from. And it's probably the people are the way that you get invested in some of these problems by putting yourself in their shoes, as well. So, but you three of you have done such a good job on that. Very little I can add on top of that. Joe, actually, I'll ask you this question. So, really, what support or communities are available to young business analysts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think now is a really perfect time for myself, Nick, and Dan to hopefully talk a little bit about the Young Business Analyst Network that we volunteer for. So YBA is a free network, free community for young BAs. As we open this call talking about what is a young BA, well, the YBA at the moment is categorizing that as anyone under the age of 35 or in the early stages of their professional career as a business analyst. And as I said, it's fully free to join. We are most active on LinkedIn. We've got a new website that's been launched. And really, as a community, what it's about is just sharing knowledge, insights, assistance, best practice, and just like supporting each other. As we've talked about a lot in this call, there's different daunting things about being a young BA. We've talked about imposter syndrome. We've talks about being the youngest in the room and the anxieties that might bring. And as a community, what we're trying to do is show that you've got a network of people that are in the same position, and those people that are in the same position, you're all going through the same thing, all learning in different ways at different paces about different things. And it's a great platform to share on that. So yeah, that was a big plug for YBA from me. I don't know if Nick and Dan would add anything else, and then maybe there's some other communities as well that we can talk to.
Yeah, Nick?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just add to that as well. Obviously, YBA is a fantastic community to join, and you can volunteer, and we get some fantastic opportunities as volunteers as well. I can't speak for Joe and Dan, but personally, I've done a few book reviews. We've obviously get to talk here about YBA. It's fantastic. We're normally at the BA conference as well in September, so there are some wonderful opportunities for YBA, but it is more about the network and sharing, and sort of just being young and young in our careers and offering some support to each other, because it's only what you don't know, right?
That's it. And I imagine as well, I mean, it's a perfect platform, not just to meet people for the first time and learn a bit about BA, but those relationships that you build at the YBA, they can carry on throughout your career, even when you're not considered young or inexperienced as a BA. You can probably still consider yourself worthy of having those relationships still that you built in the past.
Absolutely.
And I know for sure, I recall seeing the three of you at different points at the BA conference talking about the good things that YBA does as well. So definitely concur with that. And Dan, what would be your view on are there any other support or communities available to young BAs out there?
Yeah, so I think just to add another couple of avenues to look at as well. IIBA UK run lots of, or depending in the part of the country you're in and stuff, run regular meetups, and they can be around a particular topic. So you've got a speaker coming in, or it could just be a social meetup to get to know other BAs in the area. And I think that can be really valuable to know people that aren't too far away from you that you can call on, that you can have a natter with. There might be an opportunity to find someone to mentor you. I've found mentorship really valuable throughout my career. But if not, kind of finding a mentor that way, you can reach out to someone, say, through the YBA group, or the IIBA have, I think for the last couple of years, run a mentorship program, which I think is sign up sometime in January, February. So a little bit of a wait till the next one. But that's a 9-month long mentorship from April to December, which can be really, really valuable, pairing someone more junior with someone with a bit more experience in their career as well. So mentorship's definitely something I would look to be involved with.
Yeah, excellent advice, Dan. I think on top of what you've also as well, I think there's definitely benefit in going to conferences, whether they're online or in person. They all have their different advantages. I mean, online means sometimes a bit more accessible, but of course you don't always get to meet new people. Whereas at conferences, I think that a lot of the benefit is outside the conference room and just bumping into people who are like-minded and probably in a similar position. So I think there's a lot of value in that, I would say. So definitely worth mentioning BA Life and the BA conference as well. Two excellent examples. I know people are probably looking there screaming out BA and beyond, and a few of the others. Absolutely agree. Wherever you are, any BA conference is a value, I would say. I think well, not much more I would add on top of that. So I think that's perfect. So I think thank you very much for sharing that. Just before we go, as we've gone through our set of questions, are there any other snippets or advice that anyone wishes to share? I'm sorry to put you on the spot here. I know it's not a question that I had teed up before.
I think there's one thing for me, and that's just at this particular stage in a career, be a sponge, be open to, taking in things, hopefully people will be giving you good advice. All of the BAs that I've met have been really great and have been happy to share. So, if there is opportunities for informal, formal mentorship coaching, amazing, be involved with that, read books, attend webinars, listen to BAInsights, all of these things, just to take in as much information as you can to then start applying it in your career, is what was valuable for me, at least.
Agree.
Absolutely.
It makes me think then as well. I mean, maybe there's room within YBA or otherwise to have a mascot. If so, maybe the BA sponge might be.
There you go. Okay.
Sorry, there's just one of the things I heard there. Nicola, before moving swiftly on. No,
it's a good idea. I like that. I think if I could just build on that a second, it would be to not be afraid to ask for help as well. So obviously you've got fantastic resources around you, hopefully. But if there's anything that you don't know, don't be afraid to reach out. Have the courage to turn around to your manager or your mentor or somebody else in the network just to ask how they would do it, or ask if there's anything that you would do in a situation that they might not have thought of and you might not have considered as well. It's well worth it.
Absolutely, yeah, super advice. Yeah, okay. I think last bit of advice I think I will share as well is really that just remember, you won't always be a young BA, and I think if you're not that young, just remember that you were one at one point. So you might not be the person that needs to ask the questions or seek the advice or overcome some imposter syndrome. So maybe you can be the person that puts an arm around a new BA, gives them the guidance, the mentorship as Dan called out, and maybe if you have got that experience, that comfort, maybe reach out to them first and save them the discomfort of having to come to you. But that's probably all I would share. That is, of course, except for saying thank you very much for your time, the three of you. It's been really good to see you again, to hear what you're saying. It's always excellent to hear about the good work that YBA are doing as well, so we'll look out for that. So anybody that's watching this, definitely look into the YBA yourself. Well, thank you, Joe, Nick, and Dan, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.
Thank you very much.